Hi, it's Eliana here, and I am going to be discussing today my psychic impressions of talking to Wernher von Braun. Wernher von Braun had been working for NASA until the 1960s, I believe. He was the head of NASA for a while, and I had been researching the connection between him and the secret space programs. And I found something very interesting. In Collier's magazine from the 1950s, he had published design plans for building underground moon bases, and also the anti-gravity orbital space stations, circular ones. So the reason I did the research on that and found it in Collier's magazines and a few published books by Wernher von Braun and other scientists is because Wernher von Braun had telepathically told me that he had been involved in helping to build out the beginnings of the U.S. Navy secret space program in the 1950s. His contribution were the schematic plans for the anti-gravity orbital space stations, the circular ones. And the concept for that had also been featured by Disney in a short documentary with Wernher von Braun. And it was featured in Collier's magazine along with the underground circular modular underground bases, plans for the moon. So that's Wernher von Braun's contribution, and behind the scenes he actually did that. He telepathically spoke to me about last year, and that it's also connected to Project Horizon, which was U.S. Navy and Army plans. It's a 300-page document detailing how they would build, using the V rockets, how they would get to the moon, build out bases there, and launch sites for rockets as well. So that has a connection to that. Although it doesn't have Wernher von Braun's name on it, it is connected. As well as I was psychically contacted by William Tompkins, and he discussed with me his design schematics for the Tomahawk carrier ships. And basically these Tomahawks are sort of circular, triangular ships, and they have the capability to go beyond the speed of light. They're older versions of what he had originally designed for Solar Warden. That has been explored further and is now the Tomahawks. And it can go beyond the speed of light. They've worked that out, so it goes beyond the speed of light. That's what he shared with me. So I had done recently a channeling session at William Tompkins by David Lorthington, where the ship designs had been discussed. And it was quite interesting. Even though the voice didn't exactly sound like William Tompkins, it's because when somebody's channeling something or someone, sometimes the voice and mannerisms of the original person don't exactly come in as when the person was alive. It's a person who's channeling someone. So it's not exactly the same, and don't expect it to be. But the information that came in was on point concerning the triangular shaped craft that William Tompkins had designed for Solar Warden. That was discussed in the channeling, And that does sound like what William Tompkins would have been doing as part of his career for what would become later Solar Warden, designing those ships. Some of them were designed in underground facilities on Earth, and some of them were designed and launched in space. So that's what William Tompkins contributed to Solar Warden, to what would become Solar Warden in the 1980s. Again, this is U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, and Army initiatives. There is a U.S. SSP program, what's known as Lunar Space Operations on the Moon, U.S. Navy bases. And the reason why it's called Lunar Space Operations is because they have more than one base. It's not just on the moon. It's on other planets. They're also mining asteroids. So they have operations there, and they're mining on the moon as well. So it's not just U.S. Navy initiatives. It's also part of the conglomerates now, like Planetary Corporations. What I call Planetary Corporations, from what I got from my hypnosis sessions, regression, it's called Planetary Corporations because there's a lot of different corporations involved that are part of the corporation conglomerates, affiliates. What was known once as TRW, it's now called something different. They're involved in Planetary Corporations. They're part of the affiliates. Douglas MacDonald, also it's differently named now. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, NASA GPL, Northern American, and other corporations. Northern Grumman as well. So there's a Philco, there's a bunch of different corporations that contribute different resources to Planetary Corporations. And some of them don't even know what they're contributing because they're making a bunch of things that go off-world. And there's more permanent aerospace corporations and contractors that are involved in this as well. And it's all compartmentalized. Some of them know what they're doing, some of them don't. It depends how deep they're in it. But I thought I would share with you guys why I decided to do the William Tompkins channeling with David Lorthington, because William Tompkins had psychically contacted me and he wanted to share the information about the Tomahawks and what is now called the Tomahawks class carrier cruiser ships that transport a lot of the stuff between the orbital space station platforms, Mars, Earth, and the Moon. So and the Tomahawks are designed by various factions. Solar Warden, also Planetary Corporations, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mars Defense Force is part of it as well for those ship designs. It's quite classic. These carrier ships are not exactly triangular anymore. They're more circular, but with that triangular shape a bit to it, but more rounded edges now. And they're very fast. They're very fast ships. They're built for speed, high velocity. And at one point it had fusion drives, and now it's more of torsion fields and stuff like that for their engines. It got retrofitted with engines that have torsion field controls to it to power the ships. So it's really they've been upgraded from the older designs, carrier ship designs that William Tompkins first had produced. So William Tompkins contributed a lot. He wasn't just a draftsman. He was sort of like an engineer. Even though he didn't call himself an engineer, to be able to create ship designs for space travel, you have to know something about engineering and velocities and anti-gravity, which he did. So that's something that was important to discuss for me today, not just through channeling, but through what William Tompkins told me himself. He described the ships in quite the detail. And that was revealed in the channeling session, which I expected it would be. Now, David Lorthington didn't know anything about William Tompkins. I had to repeat William Tompkins' name several times to David for the channeling session. David doesn't like to know anything about what if he's channeling a person. This is the first time that David ever channeled somebody who passed on. That's in the afterlife. It's the first time. So this was an interesting experiment, and we found out quite a bit of things about William Tompkins' work with the ships and the cruisers. Now, Wernher von Braun has not been channeled, but what he psychically told me is that he had been coerced to work outside of NASA for what would become the U.S. Navy and Army early SSP programs, building circular underground bases on the moon, and later on in the 1980s, based on those earlier designs, also bases on the moon that are protected by domed shielding, so it cannot be seen on radar or telescopes from outer space. And also that Wernher von Braun had contributed the designs for the anti-gravity circular orbital space station platforms that are cloaked. And those have been upgraded as well. And they're around Earth orbit and Mars orbit, between Moon, Mars, and Earth. So there's several of them that are in our space around Earth, Mars, and the Moon. And they're capable of being moved around. They have their own engine systems that work, and these space stations are cloaked, and they are manned by human SSP assets. Whether it's part of the military or it's abducted civies, SSP assets, it's both. So I wanted to share that information, and it would be interesting if Wernher von Braun, William Tompkins was ever remote viewed, to see what comes out of that. And also Michael Relfe, because Michael Relfe had been the first SSP asset to come forward publicly. He never sought to do interviews. He never wanted publicity and fame. He had written several books called The Mars Records, detailing his experiences of how he was an SSP asset on Mars in a 20 and back, with his wife Stephanie Relfe doing the body kinesiology to figure that out. It's a little different than hypnosis from what I now understand and have learned. But my top 3 recommendations for remote viewing projects would be William Tompkins, William Mills Tompkins, Wernher von Braun, and Michael Relfe, because all 3 were associated in one way or the other with what would become the SSP programs, the U.S. Navy Army SSP programs. including Planetary Corporations, Mars Defense Force, and other military type programs that are out there in the SSP factions. So it will be interesting to see what happens if any of those folks will be remote viewed or there's more channeling sessions. Now, I'm quite interested in doing a channeling session about Wernher von Braun. I won't be doing these channeling sessions myself. I'd be asking the questions because I've had psychic contact with Wernher von Braun and William Tompkins. So I myself personally cannot be the channeler, and I cannot be a remote viewer for those projects either because I already psychically know way too much. I already know the details of the remote viewing. Whoever does a project on this, on those two individuals or Michael Relfe, what I'm discussing to you now in these little bits of information, that'll just confirm that. I don't need to remote view William Tompkins, Michael Relfe, or Wernher von Braun because I already know what will come out of those remote viewing sessions. It will be the same as what I'm talking about right now with you guys. That's why it was important for me to ask David Lorthington to do the channeling of William Tompkins, because William Tompkins requested David personally for that channeling session, and David is a very competent channeler. So that was interesting, and hopefully in the future I will ask another person who I think is a good channeler for the Wernher von Braun channeling, and to see what that was like, and maybe Michael Relfe. But it won't be me channeling them because I know way too much about them just from psychic communication with Wernher von Braun and William Tompkins. I've never psychically communicated with Michael Relfe, who is not among the living. He passed away about 5-10 years ago, maybe even longer than that. So I just know about I've read the books, Michael Relfe books recently, because I had read something from a case study where Michael Relfe had gone to the Mars bases and had been in the teleporter jumpway stations on Mars. So that's similar to what I've experienced as well. That was from a case study in somebody else's book. So, and then I also looked a little bit closer at the Mars Records books. It's fascinating. I would really recommend for folks to read the Mars Records books, because Michael Relfe was the first SSP asset to do a 20 and back. And so it's good to read his testimony. There's a lot of good information in there. Highly recommended. And I do believe that he was the original SSP asset for a 20 and back, and he had been in the Army. So, but it's not just Army folks and military folks who participate in the secret space program factions. Civilians are also abducted into it or tricked into it, depending how it's presented to them. Now, I've never been in the military. Never. But I certainly like to, I know my weapons. I know my semi-automatics. I know my guns. I am a licensed PAL holder. I have license, Canadian PAL, PAL, license to handle restricted and non-restricted firearms. I've had it for a very long time, and I'm familiar with a lot of the series of semi-automatics, the P series, P90, and P2000, PS, FS, FN, and the P series. So I'm familiar with my firearms. I've been a collector for a long time, and that was not out of just curiosity or interest. It's because I handled plasma and laser phaser type of rifles when I had my Viking class training on Mars for self-defense. I never liked to be on patrol. I never was, but I was trained for it, for combat missions. I never went out physically on them, but I was trained for them. On Mars itself, when I was on the Mars basis, Planetary Corp, I had the training, and I also had the ability in my current life to handle firearms. I also have swords and battle axes and throwing knives that I know how to use without much training. It's also part of that because we were trained to use laser swords on Mars and also in Antarctica, or what they call crystalline swords, because it's crystalline technology. So that's where the sword stuff comes from. So it's quite interesting. A lot of people say, well, it's only the military people who get taken into the secret space program factions. It's not just the military. It's also civilians who have psychic abilities, who have healing abilities, which I do have. And I was taken for those reasons because I have psychic abilities. That's why I was taken into the 60 and back quantum leap time travel with Planetary Corporations on the Mars basis and cybernetics labs. And I use my psychic abilities now, fully. I actually have psychic development training. I have shamanism training. I have Reiki training. I have Wicca light magic training. I have Akashic Records training. So I took a lot of different psychic development courses. Tarot reading. I was interested in all of it, and I took all of the training. And I'm also constantly learning new things about the occults. And I do some of the occult stuff. I'm not into death magic. I'm not into any type of demonology rituals or anything, but that stuff's still interesting to me. It was always interesting to learn about blood rituals and blood pathing. Never done one myself, but it's very interesting. And I've started studying demonology a little bit. It's interesting too. Not that I do it or participate in it. I'm not a Satanist and never want to be one, but I have started to study about the dark side of magic because I'm also a magic practitioner and teacher. So for me, it's good to know these things. I don't practice it, but it was about time to learn more about it. And so I have been. I always like to study and learn new things about magic, whether light or dark magic. There's a balance between both. I'm a white light magic practitioner, but learning about other aspects, the darker aspects of magic, is also important, just to know how it works and what it is and how it's used, because for self-protection, the more you know about magic, the better, whether it's light magic or dark magic. And I'm always honest about what I study and learn or teach. So that's something I've been doing recently. And the occult is part of the secret space program training as well, about developing your psychic abilities. Some of the occult stuff is incorporated into that. You're taught about what magic is and how it works, how energy works, how to manipulate energy. Because it's a huge core of your psychic ability to know how to manipulate energy and work with energy. And work with the energy itself. It's a huge part of psychic development. whether you're an SSP asset or not. It's part of the training. For me, it was part of the training on the Mars basis. The occult stuff and the psychic stuff, how to work with energy. So I don't ever rarely talk about those aspects, but the training was there. So, and I do freely use my psychic abilities. I use them on a daily basis. It's part of me. I can shut it off and turn it back on. I can control it, and because I've been working with it for a long time. Psychics are not just born. You have to have the training for it. Some people are naturally psychic. They're great psychics and they're good at it instantly. And other people are psychic, but they need training to work with it correctly. I was a decent psychic before training, but I believe you should be trained as a psychic, to be a psychic, to do the work that you do. It's not just handed down to you. It comes with great responsibility. You don't just instantly become a psychic. You work for it. You study. You learn it. You practice it. That's what makes you a good psychic. That's what makes you a good healer. You learn it, you practice it, and you work with the energy. Don't just expect to instantly be a healer. I have people asking me all the time, well, why can't I just be like you? Because I wasn't instantly a psychic or a healer. I had the abilities, but I trained for it. It wasn't just handed down to me on a silver platter. I worked for it. It was hard work, and I did it. That's why I'm good at what I do, because I really worked hard for it, to learn it and to develop it further out than just my natural abilities. And I'm very humbled right now, because I'm trying to develop a psychic development course. So, and it's taking time because there's a lot of material to put together. It's quite interesting going back to the basics and kind of relearning psychic development, how to actually make it into a course that's workable for folks down the road. So it's not easy. It's not easy being a psychic, a teacher, and a healer. It's not always easy. With all that comes great responsibility. You have to be responsible for it. For the magic, for using the energy, for working with energy. I know it's off topic from the SSP stuff, but it's very important and it's part of being a psychic. It's part of being a psychic, the energy, how you work with it, how you channel it, how even channeling. Nobody taught me channeling, it just comes naturally to me. So to teach channeling, I have to write course material because it comes naturally to me. Nobody taught me that. Nobody really even, well, I learned remote viewing. The strict standard way and the remote sensing, which isn't so strict. But again, it comes naturally to me. And to teach it, I'm not going to teach strict remote viewing because it's too much. I would be teaching a modified version of it when I teach it, when I'm ready to teach it. I'm not going to be teaching it the standard classical way because that doesn't really work for me. So, there's so much going on, and I just wanted to share some of the stuff that I'm doing and what I've been looking into. So thank you so much, and namaste.